Hi, I'm Sarah Cowgill, along with Andrew Moran, Dave Patterson, Graham Noble, and John Clark. And this is The Conservative Five, an online TV news production of Liberty Nation News. On today's episode, Overwatch. What the heck happened to the Democratic Party between 2016 and 2024? We'll discuss in Hard Left Walz. Trump's policy playbook snatched by the Harris-Walz ticket. What you should know in, well, this looks familiar. And crazy in American politics is only surpassed by crazier around the globe. And we'll take you there in While You Were Distracted. Finally, it's another quick fix to flex the brain and Just for Fun, Volume 55. All this and more coming up in this edition of The Conservative Five.
That's pretty simple.
America was introduced to the latest shiny object of the Democratic Party, Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. Tagged as Kamala Harris's running mate, Walz brings the most radical left-wing policies ever to be this close to ascending to the two highest offices in the land. Harris might have some splaining to do. It does boggle the mind that in just 8 years, Democrats who rolled Bernie Sanders out of town, afraid he was too commie-leaning, picked this guy. What an about face. I don't know about you people, but I am beginning to miss Bernie. He was almost normal. It's a huge U-turn, John Clark. What happened?
Well, you pick on me because I'm in Vermont. Everybody thinks nobody lives in Vermont but Bernie Sanders.
Are you wearing your mittens?
Yeah, well, there's a funny story behind that, but I'll spare our listeners. I think it's very interesting how you set this up, but I think it really reveals a lot about this party. Bernie Sanders was not removed because of his far left communism. He was removed because he was not the anointed one. He was removed because Hillary was the chosen elect in the new hierarchy, which is really about power, not policy. And so, this is a switch. And interestingly, a lot of voters were so upset about that they became Trump supporters. So too did a lot of Obama supporters when they felt disenfranchised by their party. Now, a more interesting comparison might be between Walz and RFK Jr. He's the new Bernie. He wasn't as far left as Bernie or Walz, and they have canceled him, essentially. And today he has a newsletter out calling the Democrats the greatest threat to democracy because he got 140,000 signatures to get on the ballot in New York. They don't want him there any more than they want Bernie. So I think what's really happening is this is a gift to Americans because instead of trying to balance the ticket, as RFK himself did by picking, a left-leaning vice presidential running mate, she's picked another far lefty. And it's interesting because, for one thing, she has no policies of her own. So she's starting from zero, trying to create some kind of substance to someone who really hasn't had any. But where is RFK in all this? And how many people are feeling disenchanted by the Democratic Party watching this? And look at the exhibit to the American people. We have Walz showing us the far left extremism that has really dominated this party while Joe Biden pretended to be a uniter to bring Americans together in tolerance. It's good. This gives the insight into what Kamala Harris means when she says, and I quote, "What can be unburdened by what has been." That's actually a mantra for the new utopia. What she's really keying into her listening cult audience is we can have, you can raid stores and shoplift and have crime and not be burdened by the rule of law that has been. We can open the borders and not be burdened by the rule of law that has been. We can spend all the money we want with infinite income for everyone, destroy the currency and not be bound by the economics and the math that has been. This actually shows us what she really means when she says that, in my view. And I think it's going to send a lot of people properly running for the hills.
Well, that's one way of putting
Not
it.
Vermont. Not Vermont.
That's the scariest thing we've heard since Dave was talking about Ukraine not too long ago. What I want to know if Trump was the catalyst to this in 2016, they went crazy and saw an opening. The very progressive left saw this opening to make him the boogeyman and create, if you want the boogeyman or if you want peace, love, and harmony. But that's just kind of smoke and mirrors, Graham. I mean, did Trump do this to us in a not meaningful way? I mean, I'm sure he didn't plan on it, but I think he might have caused this.
I don't think that personally. I believe that Obama was the true catalyst of this. I believe that everything that is going on now, they began planning this when they gave Barack Obama the nomination when he ran back in 2008. And I think kind of it was the other way around with Trump. Is Trump was created by this movement of the progressive left to push us all towards this insane kind of lawless utopia where, you know, economics and mathematics don't actually matter anymore because we can all just do what we want, you know, as long as we're loyal to the almighty state. And I think that movement began and was, they were laying the groundwork of it under Obama. I think perhaps some of these more lunatic fringe progressives are probably disappointed that Obama never went as far as they wanted to go. But I think that's when it started, and I think Trump was created by that. He basically became he was the pendulum swinging the other way, if you want. But then, of course, you know, after 4 years of Trump, didn't even take 4 years of Trump. It took just the few months of Trump campaigning for president for them to decide, wow, we can actually now make this guy the scapegoat. You know, we can say that what we're doing is a reaction to this guy who is going to be who's going to be an extreme right-wing dictator and is going to destroy the world. So I think they used Trump as the excuse almost, but they were going this way before Trump even came on the scene, I think.
Well, good point. In Walz's case, he's a Democratic governor of a swing state. But if we look at all the governors across the land, the Democratic governors, are they all hardcore left, or are there any moderate Dem party people left? I mean, it seems to me that progressives are just a faction. They're a loud faction. But Andrew, help me out here.
Well, you know, a lot of them are hard leftists, and if they're not hard leftists, they get infected with a woke mind virus, to quote, you know, the great Elon Musk. So it's challenging to find any Democrat who is you know, right of Tim Walz. And let's look at the list of some mainstream governors that you know many people would know. Washington State Governor Jay Inslee. He signed a law giving refuge for transgender minors to protect them from their parents. In New York, you have Governor Kathy Hochul, who is fast-tracking illegal immigrants for government jobs, essentially creating new state positions to give them some semblance of employment. In Illinois, Governor J.B. Pritzker, he's running that state into the ground. He calls it the most progressive state, but it's a bankrupt state with a lot of crime. In California, everyone knows Gavin Newsom's record. When Kamala Harris, when she was picking her running mate, people said, "Oh, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro." Once again, he is a progressive. He was a progressive, or excuse me, is a progressive governor, and they picked him just because of his support for Israel. But what made Josh Shapiro funny is because he tergiversated on Israel for absolutely nothing at all because he didn't get the position. So it's hard to find any moderate Democrats sitting in power who could appeal to perhaps, you know, the traditional value Americans. And it's hard to maintain the whole blue dog Democrat appeal when the extremes dominate the organization, when they dominate the Democratic National Committee, and they want to give illegals driver's licenses. They want to abandon parental rights. They just want to, you know, spend money, give you know, multinational corporations all this money, and they have no clue what they're doing on foreign policy. And for that, on foreign policy, I will defer to Dave Patterson on that issue.
Dave, you can go ahead and answer that question for Andrew. But then I kind of want to pivot back to if we've watched this party change in real time from kind of normal center, left to center to crazy. But go ahead, Dave, answer Andrew's question.
I think that I fall on the side of Graham here, because what we've seen, starting from the Obama administration and then through the Biden-Harris failures, with the one exception of the oasis of sanity between the two, it's a continuum from liberal policies to progressive policies to radical progressive leftist policies. What we've seen has been the growing of the socialist agenda. First, these radicals start to tear down the institutions that Americans have depended on for national security, local neighborhood safety. Despite the Biden administration's claims that the military being the best, the military is devolving. We can't build ships or intercontinental ballistic missiles or aircraft on cost, on time, and that perform. Recruitment has failed to meet its goals for the last 3.5 years. And the operational leadership, well, we've seen that in action. With very few exceptions, it's feckless, afraid. It's afraid of a military like Iran causing havoc in the Middle East. It will not respond appropriately to Iran. There is no one in the current administration that will be willing to stop them. We don't have the Pentagon of Reagan or Bush or Trump, even for that matter. The march from democracy, Sarah, and freedom to an anemic socialist nanny state that won't defend its people, it's been relentless and unfortunately successful, and that should be frightening.
I implore our viewers to look at the Democratic National Convention's 1992 campaign promises. It's completely night and day over the last 30 years. At that time in 1992, they're promising what? Securing the border, lowering taxes, reining in federal spending, tackling the national debt. And then you fast forward to the president, it's completely different. It's night and day. That when I saw that a few days ago, it just wow. It's just what the heck happened to the Democratic Party in just a couple of decades.
Well, and just according to Graham, since Obama was in 2008. So, I mean, were we all sleeping? Did we not see this change? We've been watching the Republican Party go from being the party of billionaires and millionaires to the working man. And so while we were watching that, were we distracted and not watching what happened with the Democrats?
Sarah, to pick up on Andrew's point, not to go too far back, but in 1968, when you had the riots in Chicago at the Democratic Convention, and you had this really sort of resurgence of Republican conservative points of view, and you had Nixon, who eventually was elected, and I think the Republicans at that point went, "I'm glad that's over, and we've got Nixon in there." But what happened as a consequence of that was that all of those crazies and liberals and radicals that we faced on the streets of Chicago, they became the professors in our universities. And the results of that are what we're seeing today.
Yeah, you go back. I was going to make the exact same point. You saw this happening 10 years ago on the college campuses. These kids who were so apoplectic because somebody wore a costume at a Halloween party in Yale University, 2015. So you're seeing the consequences of how these professors indoctrinate these kids, and then these kids are going to be leading the companies. They're going to be working in government. They're going to be running for office. It's terrifying of what's happening. But when you saw this happening 15 years ago. Anyone could have seen what would happen 15 years ago and what's occurring today.
And I don't think
I mean, all the country's major institutions are dominated by this progressive people with this progressive ideology. I mean, big tech. I always find it funny that the Democrats still like to say that they're opposed to corporate America and the greedy corporations and that, but many of those corporations today are run by progressives. And then, of course, they dominate the media and they dominate the entertainment industry. Mm-hmm. And worst of all, they dominate the academic institutions. And so that's why, the rest of America may not have been asleep, but the rest of America has really had no way to fight back against all these huge national institutions that have been taken over by progressives and are forcing this stuff down our throats. And unfortunately, the only thing that stands between us and their megalomaniacal kind of schemes is a Republican Party that has the backbone of a dead jellyfish. We got a handful of Republicans who are willing to actually speak out against these people, and the rest of them are just hopeless. And so, and then guess what else is standing between them and us? Oh, Donald Trump, and that's why they all hate him as much as they do and are willing to go to any length to destroy the man.
Here's one name. Does anyone remember this name? James Damore. Does anyone remember this guy? 10 years ago, he wrote a memo at Google saying essentially how men and women are different. And what happened? He got fired from Google because of that memo. And that dominated a lot of headlines for a long time. And that was a glimpse into the future. And that was, I think, about 10 years ago. So when you talk about progressivism running these major corporations and massive institutions, Graham is absolutely correct.
I agree with everyone. And I just think, though, that the Republican Party, in trying to develop its own identity, really, it's not his job to develop the Democrats' identity. And I think that's been the schism we've looked at with Bernie and with RFK, et cetera. That party is in chaos, and it's having a very hard time defining what it is in the midst of its schizophrenic episode. And that's what I think we see.
Gosh, maybe we'll see old RFK slide right in there and we'll stick another Kennedy in the White House. That'd be interesting. Well, guys, I think the Bernie bros are probably having the last laugh after being excommunicated 8 years ago. Their freak flag is flying high in the Democratic Party. So I guess we watch and wait for the dance with Walz to begin or end. Thanks for tuning in. Kamala Harris has no real platform to speak of besides abortion rights. Economy under her watch is in the commode. The border is wide open, inflation is high, and wages stagnant. USA is a hot mess. Ms. Harris revealed a couple of presidential policy points recently, and I think we have heard this all before. It has often been said that imitation is the greatest form of flattery. If that's the case, former President Donald Trump ought to feel quite flattered. James Fight, Liberty Nation News, penned a great article this week pointing out all the eerily similar promises made by Harris. Jim is not here, but Graham Noble is and can run wild on this topic. You are up, Mr. Noble.
Thanks, Sarah. I think if you had a scenario, if this was possible, if you could go out onto the street and you could scoop up perhaps 25 random people who you identified, you found out beforehand that they all identified themselves as Democrat voters, and you grab like 25 of them, but they're people who are not really, they're not immersed in politics. They're just living their lives, but they happen to be Democrat voters. You could take them to sit them down in a room, and then you could reel off a bunch of Trump policies to them. Now, we're assuming here that they don't know where these policies come from. You could reel off those policies and say, so what do you think of those? You think those are good ideas, bad ideas? I'm willing to bet that out of that random 25 Democrat voters, probably anywhere between 15 and 20 of them would nod their heads to every one of those policies and say, that sounds like a great idea. Of course, then they'd be horrified once you told them they were Trump's policies. But you see, the point of this is that Democrats, generally speaking, do not vote for policies. They vote for personalities, and they vote for emotion, and they vote according to what sound bites they've heard. The policies themselves are less important. So in a way, it's kind of easy for Kamala Harris or for any other Democrat, for that matter, to come out with policy positions that normally you'd think only a Republican would come up with, and Democrats would be horrified at the idea of these positions. But most Democrat voters, apart from the hardcore committed progressives, most Democrat voters are not voting primarily for the policies. And so it's actually easy for Kamala Harris to come out and say, I'm going to secure the border. And okay, it's a joke because we all know it was her job to secure the border. Starting from the beginning of 2021, that was her job. She was named the border czar. I don't know if Biden himself ever called her the border czar, but certainly the left-leaning media frequently used that term, border czar, when they were talking about Kamala Harris. And of course, Axios recently made fools of themselves when they came out and said she was never the border czar. And then somebody pointed out that they themselves had described her as the border czar. But
maybe they put her in charge of the border because she'd fail, and that's what they want.
Well, perhaps, well, that's a good observation, Sarah. That is actually quite interesting. Yeah. But anyway, so now she does that, and then of course she comes out the other day with this thing about, well, we're going to end tax on tips for service industry workers. Well, Kamala Harris was the one whose vote in 2022 broke the tie in the Senate to pass the Inflation Reduction Act, and within that act was a whole section about giving the IRS more power to go after service industry workers to make sure that they were being taxed on their tips. And for her now to come around and say that, pretend that that's her idea, no tax on tips, is outrageous. I mean, Trump said it months ago. And of course, they're even now saying, even Karine Jean-Pierre, White House spokesperson, just the other day said, oh, Joe Biden would sign a bill, to end tax on tips. Well, they're literally, you always think with politicians, okay, they're just saying what they want, what they think they want, what they think people want to hear in order to get elected. But the Democrats have taken that whole idea to a whole new level now. And, considering that Kamala Harris back in 2020, when she was still running in the primaries, in the Democrat primaries for the president, she actually said that if she became president on day one, she would close the illegal alien detention centers. And so for her now to pretend that she's going to secure the border and she's going to lower taxes and she's going to end taxation on tips, it's just blatantly saying things that she has no intention whatsoever of doing. But she thinks, well, these are, people like these ideas. Most of the American people like all of those ideas. So I'll just come out and say that they were my ideas. And it's just crazy. I mean, Biden's been accused of plagiarism on a few occasions, and she's kind of taken plagiarism to a whole new level.
I'm surprised that the press bought into that after they claimed they were such hoodwinked over Biden being clearly cognitively and physically in a major decline. And yet they said, oh, we were surprised. They lied to us. We don't like them. We don't like Joe Biden. Is the press surprised that Kamala Harris is now saying she wants to do the same things Trump is doing, or are they covering for her and saying she's making up these great policies, Dave?
Surprised isn't the word I'd use. I think that the word is delighted. The mainstream fawning press is delighted to have the opportunity to employ its creative fiction skills. They're attempting to take a duo with extremely harmful and intellectually entrenched social justice ideas and then they want to paint them as moderates. Make no mistake, Harris and Walz are not moderates. They are radical progressives who want to remake America in their perverse image of reality. Harris now says she isn't for universal health care, a key element, though, of her 2019 failed presidential campaign. Mm-hmm. She was an advocate for defunding police departments, the only bulwark that we citizens have between us and anarchy. Now she's not. Harris can try to distance herself from the Biden-Harris open borders debacle, the Afghanistan retreat disaster, and the economic wasteland they've created for the poor and the middle class, but she can't. Sarah, you can buy a white horse, paint stripes on it, but it doesn't become a zebra.
I'll make it a zebra, darn it. I've always wanted a zebra. Okay. I'm gonna pick up on something Graham said. Clark, I never call you by your first name. I don't know why that is, but I like your tie today. Anyway, do the voters on the left care about policy, or do they just want to have their feelings, hugged and comforted?
Short answer, no. They don't care about policy, and it's provable. And you can call me by my last name. I call you Cowgirl. And this is another one of my 50-cent tag sale ties.
That is not my last name, however.
I know.
Go ahead.
My affectionate moniker for you as a fellow agrarian.
Yes.
No, they don't care about policy. And actually, I think we really need to get our brains. We have rational brains, hopefully. And so we don't understand what they're doing sometimes. And it comes back to this idea of an ideology eclipsing rational policy. And ultimately, I'll begin where I end. This social justice ideology does not coexist with rational policy. Even within its own belief system, there are tensions that are irreconcilable. For instance, intersectionality, as we see the left now fight about whether the transgender is above the black, is above the woman, is above the person who has all three. This is nothing but endless conflict, and so too with the policies. And in the end, they have conflicts in their policies. They can't handle anything other than a one-party monolith. And so queer theory, critical race theory, gender theory has come out and dominated this. These are theories that, by the way, all fall on their faces, completely irrational, completely feely, touchy-feely, as you say. And they don't yield anything but harm to the very people that they pretend to help. Now, if you're a black person and you take exception to these policies, you will be immediately attacked, okay? You're no longer the black person they're defending. You're the black person that dares go against the party mantra. If you're a
black
woman, pardon?
You ain't black.
You ain't black. And that's right, you literally are not black. And if you are a young girl who says, well, I was duped into having my breasts removed and all these surgeries, they will attack you because you're going against the ideology. Are we talking about policies now? Are we talking about whether transgender surgeries are scientifically better or worse? No, we're talking about an ideology. And as long as this ideology tries to wrangle with policies, you will always see horrible policies presented by people who are DEI as if they are good. So bad policy gets packaged in the identity world and suddenly it becomes good. Good policy is not even something that is identifiable. The numerous tensions within this chaos that we see is a translation, I believe, of policy from an ideology that itself is so false, dysfunctional, hateful, and toxic that it can never translate into anything else but chaos, toxicity, and destruction. Because that's really what it's about, is destroying everything from the family to the border to the currency so they can recreate this new thing. They've never told us what it is. Look around. We see what it is. It's terrible. So yeah, they don't really care about policy. And they don't want to hear that electric cars may hurt the environment because they already believe that they save the environment. This is massive cognitive dissonance. This is a cult. This is a cult in chaos. That's what I think we see.
Okay. And now you've painted a horrible picture for 100 years from now where we're all eunuchs. Thank you. Anyway, Andrew, let's say so Kamala is serious about all this. Could her policies actually, the ones she's promising, result in change for the better? Or is she just talking blowing smoke? Where?
Well, if you're talking about no taxes on tips, absolutely, that would benefit millions of workers. That's fantastic. On the other hand, at a time when the government's running a $1.5 trillion deficit and will run a $2 trillion deficit in a few years and a $35 trillion national debt, and no one is cutting any spending, it's going to be quite difficult to make up for the revenue. Everything that Graham said, I was saying the exact same thing. So I'm going to go off the cuff here. Policy-wise, you guys make a good point. But Liberty Nation News reported on a recent CNBC study, and it showed that many voters have no clue what the policies are of either candidates. At the same time, many Democrat voters say that it would make their policy that would make no difference on the economy or their personal finances. So maybe they're just, because they don't know policy, they just admit defeat and say, you know what, no matter what they do, it's not going to matter. But other policies that we've seen over the last few years obviously is not helping the American people whatsoever. Real wage growth, inflation adjusted, of course, is negative. Median weekly earnings are negative. Inflation is eating everyone's lunch. Minorities' wages are down. So the policies presented by the current administration, have not worked. And despite Kamala Harris's acting like she's never been in office, the media are buying that lock, stock, and barrel. You saw a recent CBS News coverage of the Trump and Harris proposals of the no taxes on tip, and it's just the divergence is remarkable. Here's what they said about Trump presenting the no tax tip. Quote, former President Donald Trump's vow to stop taxing tips would cost the federal government up to $250 billion over 10 years, according to a nonpartisan watchdog group. Now, here's a Same Network's coverage of Harris's scheme. Quote, Vice President Kamala Harris is rolling out a new policy position, saying she'll fight to end taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers. That's just astounding. The exact same policy. And that's what CBS News presents to people on X. It's remarkable. Now, just the economics alone, it's not costing government anything. It's the people's money, not the government's money. So I can't stand when you talk about tax cuts and then you have these people saying, oh, it's going to cost the government. The government, they confiscate your wealth. It's not your wealth. And I'll say one more thing about the press and Kamala Harris. Axios, they did a recent excellent reporting on how the Kamala Harris campaign, they're manipulating headlines in the Google search ads. And that was quite interesting. That's quite the scoop. Mm-hmm. But then Axios reporter, because she received some pushback on X from left-leaning voters, she said, oh, it's not much of a big deal. It's okay. It's just politics. It's just, the way the media is covering everything from, Kamala Harris copying Trump to just, campaign tactic, it's befuddling. And it's quite frustrating when you, as Graham said, when you're immersed in this day after day.
Well, it's not good manners to steal the playbook from the other side. But can they run the plays? Liberty Nation News will report back on the status of the big game. Stay tuned, and thanks for watching. While Joe Biden was being hustled off the stage and stuffed back in his basement, Kamala Harris picked up the hardest leftist she could tap to be on her presidential ticket. Trump was nearly assassinated, and that kept everyone from paying attention to the craziness unfolding overseas. It seems with each passing day, the tensions throughout the world are growing. Iran, North Korea, and China are providing support to Russia to sustain its brutal and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. Iran is providing short-range missiles to Russia to replenish its supply to attack Ukraine, and a recent report from the U.S. intelligence community is revealing that Iran is back on the nuclear weapons development path. Is there any light at the end of the unsettling tunnel, Dave, or is that simply a train barreling toward us?
Well, I'm afraid, Sarah, it's a train, and it's moving fast. The Biden-Harris worldview is not capable of dealing effectively with the dangerous threats that the U.S. faces, every single day. And with every artillery shell, every attack drone, every short-range missile Russia gets from its allies, well, that means that Americans have to pay more to provide more weapons and munitions to Ukraine to counter those Russian weapons. The recent report by the U.S. intelligence community, as you say, indicates that Iran is continuing its pursuit of nuclear weapons. Well, shocker, But the U.S. report is imprecise and is written as though Iran developing nuclear weapons was an epiphany. The International Atomic Energy Commission, for all its faults, has been saying that same thing for 2 years. The U.S. intelligence community is really has some catching up to do. But the fact is that you have a real axis of evil, a real axis of threats when you look at Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, and we just simply have to deal with them. You have to deal with them effectively. What are we doing in the Red Sea, for example? The Houthi terrorists in Yemen, backed by Iran, fire weapons at commercial vessels. We try to take them out, but we don't destroy the Houthis in Yemen. We don't destroy the ports from which they sail their unmanned sea vehicles. We have to destroy the evil that is causing such mayhem in the area.
Perhaps destroying Hamas might help, or is that going to make it worse?
Yeah, you bring up a good point,
all we're
Sarah.
doing is slowing people down, it seems.
Yeah, you bring up a very good point. Let me see. ISIS was declared a terrorist organization, and Trump went after it and destroyed it effectively. We have Hezbollah that is identified as a terrorist organization, Hamas that is identified as a terrorist organization, and yet we don't go after them with the same vigor that we went after ISIS.
Well, we let the Taliban take over in about 20 minutes. Once we pulled out of Afghanistan. Hey, come on, in, yours again. We're done. Anyway.
That was a Biden-Harris worldview consequence.
Yeah, well, whatever. I don't know. I mean, the evil axis seems to be China, Russia, and North Korea. If they team up, Clark, is it on?
Well, I think the complexity, as I think Dave is hinting, is a little different than maybe our traditional notions. The idea of a mutually assured destruction and nuclear salvos may actually be looming over us right now. There are some scary things going on in the world, and the technologies and the nuclear powers that exist today are truly terrifying. And our own nuclear armaments are quite dilapidated and neglected. I think Dave would agree. But I think the threat is bigger. And first of all, so you've asked me about the three countries. I think North Korea is always going to be a little bit of the odd man out of the party, a little bit of a Charles Manson, even for for China and Russia. But let's think about this a minute, because China and Russia have very different nuclear armaments, very different nuclear strategies, and very different geopolitical goals. And yet, where they're really cooperating, as Dave says, it costs money when we have to counter the armament costs. It destroyed the Soviet Union and us to be embroiled in Afghanistan fiscally. The long war that may be more destructive to America is a soft war of an economic collaboration, particularly between Russia and China, on food, on rare earth metals, on essential elements that are required for EV cars and microchip process and DEF. I mean, America is gradually losing its position in the world, not because of how many nuclear warheads it has, but because while its enemies are rubbing their hands together gleefully, we are fighting over abortion up until birth, over a 200-year-old civil rights, civil war. We're fighting over our borders and whether we should just fling them open or not. We have a fentanyl crisis. We have domestic enemies. We have terrorists here, Dave. We're not going after the Christian nationalists. I think that what we see, that the real threat to our world is, or to our country, is more domestic than foreign, and that those foreign enemies are just looking at these social justice warriors as their allies. They don't have to do anything. And so, I mean, that again sounds kind of dark, but I think it's where we are. We're talking about a geopolitical repositioning of the world, and America is at sleep with its domestic social justice squabbling, and we're not unified. The other nations are, and they're not facing these domestic problems, and they are actually upping their game economically. So I think Russia and China consolidated economically could be a far more destructive threat to this country than if they were military partners. And it seems that they're both.
Well, how do we make how does the U.S. make the growling dogs stay in their crates, Graham? I mean, how do we come back out and say, nope, we're still in charge?
Well, that's a tough one, because and by far the biggest threat to us, whether it's geopolitical, economically or militarily, is China. And we should have dealt with that problem a long time ago by drastic measures. I mean, there was a time that if we just had stopped buying Chinese goods altogether, their economy would collapse. We are by far their biggest customer. And 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 that seems like a drastic measure, and today even more so. Wow, could we actually do that? Could we actually completely divest ourselves from China? It would cause chaos throughout the world economy. But I actually, my personal belief is it would be worth it. It would be worth all the pain, because the Chinese would not survive economically without us as a customer. But that's just my personal view, and I'm sure Andrew or other economists would give me 1,000 reasons why, oh no, we shouldn't do that. But I believe it's better to have an economic Armageddon than a nuclear one. But here's the problem right now we've got, is that there is a very large amount of very real evidence that suggests the Biden family is wholly owned by the Chinese. And of course that's a problem. And that's why really is not the only reason, but it's one of the main reasons why I believe that the Biden administration has never taken any strong action against any of our adversaries, because all our adversaries, as John Clark was just pointed out there, all of our adversaries, they may not be powers. Like China and Russia aren't really powers at all. As John said, they've got completely different worldviews, different cultures, different beliefs, and different goals. But it's the old saying: the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so China is in bed with North Korea, with Iran, and with Russia, all of our adversaries. And because it's China, and because the Biden family, as the evidence suggests, has enriched themselves off of China, they are not going to do anything to ruffle the Chinese feathers too much. Now, some people would say, well, but Joe Biden imposed tariffs on Chinese goods. Well, you know that behind the scenes they had a discussion about that with the Chinese, and I'm sure the Chinese said, yeah, go ahead and do that. That's fine. Go ahead and do that. If that makes you look strong at home, then okay, But the reality is that we have an administration that is, for financial reasons, unwilling to go up against our adversaries. And also they know that they're going to ruffle too many feathers politically with the left. We can't be seen to be, going after Iran, because look at how many people in this country on the left would get upset if we actually did go after Iran, or if we went after Hezbollah, or we went after Hamas. There will be people burning American cities to the ground. And these would be people who support the Democratic Party. So, yeah, it's a mess. And is any of it solvable at this point? I'm not even going to try to. I'm not getting in the prediction game on that front. No.
Kamala has a plan. She stole it from Trump, and she's going to be a strong leader. So,
okay, so that brings up a question, Andrew. If all this money is going this way and that way, flying in between Iran and Russia and China, blah, 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 how do you keep an eye on the money trail that disappears and all of a sudden we see another on American soil attack? How do we keep track of this?
I will get to that in a moment. I'd like to address a couple things Graham said. So first of all, China's economy is slowing. That's one of the biggest threats to the global financial markets right now, is softening demand from China. Its property sector's collapsed. The local governments are immensely in debt. Trade in that country, exports are falling. They're importing a lot of stuff. That's one. Two, the biggest threat to the world, to the United States right now, is not geopolitics, not foreign policy. It's the national debt. It's going to be $52 trillion in the next 10 years, $2 trillion interest payments, $2 trillion annual budget deficit. Social Security is running out of money, so that's the biggest threat to the United States. On Russia, Russia's economy has been doing very well. Its invasion of Ukraine is probably the best things that happened to Russia. The economy is having the fastest growth streak in nearly 20 years. It's exporting a lot of oil. Oil revenues are up. I think even Dave alluded to this in our last C5 show. Now, to your question, Sarah. I think America's foreign policy is probably the biggest anti-America boondoggle and wealth redistribution scheme. The Biden administration, when it unfroze that few $billions in Iran, even Stevie Rich and Ray Charles locked in a closet blindfolded could have seen the consequences of that decision. You have the U.S. extending its tentacles in every crevice of the world, bribing dictators with foreign aid, forcing allies to adopt similar adventurism policies, destabilizing regions that have also sparked unintended consequences. I'm gonna have to quote former Congressman Ron Paul here in 2008 when he was on a Fox News debate and he was talking foreign policy. And I may cause Dave to have a burst of blood vessel here, and maybe he want a regime change somewhere. I don't maybe a regime
Close your ears.
Canada.
Close your ears.
But anyway, so he says, quote, "We have Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. They have nuclear weapons, and we're giving them money. Let me see if I get this right. We need to borrow $10 billion from China, and then we give it to Musharraf, who's a military dictator who overthrew an elected government while we promote democracy in Iraq." And that is a summary of how convoluted, expensive, and dangerous the U.S. foreign policy is, not just for the world, but also a highly indebted country that needs the rest of the world to buy U.S. Treasury securities to maintain this semblance of a superpower.
Dave, you have a
Yeah,
vein throbbing there.
I see a vein. I see a vein.
I'll tell you, the basic assumption that Andrew comes at this is that Republican administrations are, by their very nature, immune from lunacy, and they aren't.
Are you sure about that? I'm pretty sure there's some
they have their
lunacy
share
involved.
And in each of those cases, if you pull the thread all the way through, you find that the decision was made totally for different reasons than the one that Ron Paul conflated. But nonetheless, the consequences are pretty much the same. And if all of us were prescient and able to foretell the future, we probably wouldn't make those kinds of mistakes. But nonetheless, politicians do, and we look back on them and would hope that that American politicians and leadership would see these kinds of errors and not make them again. I know suddenly Pollyanna, is
what happened to you?
Well, but it really goes back to a fundamental mistake that underpins all manner of different administrations, and that is the mantra that, well, our foreign policy is based on the concept of, if we're real nice to you, then you'll be real nice to us, right? Well, no, of course not. Other countries have their own self-interest, and we seem to be the only country that traditionally and regularly suborns our national interest to the interests of others, and that's why we're in the position that we are.
That evokes the Trump's address to the UN. I can't remember which year it was, but Trump's address to the UN, where he said precisely that. And I thought, well, finally, someone who is actually looking at foreign policy from a completely realistic and pragmatic point of view. He told all those countries, I am going to defend America's interests. I'm going to put America's interests first. Each one of you would do the same for your country. And I totally understand that. And I'm not criticizing you for it. That's what you're going to do, obviously, and I'm going to do the same thing. And it was actually refreshing to hear a US president actually say that to the rest of the world,
instead of, hey, come on over and shake my money tree.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing, though. So if the United States didn't have all these foreign entanglements and have all these troops in South Korea and Middle East and Africa, all those troops could be home right now defending the United States from either the invasion of the southern border or some other external threats. That's just mind-numbing to me. And I'm not sure if Graham meant to say this. I'm not sure if he actually supports the U.S. Attacking Iran or attacking them like the Houthis, but if you were to attack Iran, you already see the chaos in the global energy markets right now. $80 a barrel on the brink of perhaps Israel and Iran war. If that were to happen, of course there'll be a wider regional conflict, and you're going to have greater inflationary pressures move at a time when you already have above trend high cost of living in a country where everyone just hates this economy. So if you're prepared to do that, prepared also for the inflationary consequences. Now, I'm not putting words in your mouth, Graham. I think that's what
I get it, and I appreciate the fact that you made the point that you weren't putting words in my mouth. No, I just mentioned the fact that obviously the Biden administration, they're not going to take any direct action against the Iranians because they would upset too many of their progressive supporters and friends. But no, the last thing we want to do is be launch a military attack on Iran would be a terrible idea. I mean, the thing is, we could have probably by now, if we'd set our minds to it, we could have probably many years ago orchestrated, or at least not orchestrated, but facilitated the bringing down of the mullahs and the replacement of them by more sensible people, because most of the Iranian people actually are quite fond of the United States, but it's the lunatics that are running that country, and we could have probably aided some more sensible Iranians in overthrowing their government, which is probably something we could have done. And I know everyone, thinks, oh my God, what another terrible, awful CIA overseas adventure that's going to end in disaster.
Terrible adventure.
All we had to do is give a certain amount of support, financial and otherwise, to the people in Iran who are actually ready and willing to rise up against their own government. And the couple times they've done that over the last 15, 20 years, we turned our backs on them. And I think that was a mistake. In fact, our entire reaction to what was called the Arab Spring was a complete disaster. And if we'd handled that whole situation better, we could have, without firing a single shot, we could have got rid of several of our adversaries in the Middle East and North Africa, just like that. But
Andrew,
we failed to rise up to the task.
So Andrew,
I know Dave's gonna say, "Ooh, regime change in Iran."
Ooh, regime change. No, Andrew, I just want to remind you, back in 1986, that Iran.
I was not born yet.
Shut up, Andrew.
That's
Good.
what we have books for, Andrew. We have books.
You got the Google.
That in 1986, Iran was being mischievous in the Arabian Sea, and we sent half their navy to the bottom. And it sent a message. And oh my gosh, the oil prices didn't go sky high, because you know why? Because all of their regional neighbors were delighted that we did this. If Iran were a hail fellow well met in the region, yes, you'd have a point. They aren't. They are the scourge of the region, and all of their neighbors believe that.
But if you look at reports, there was the IOC, the Islamic Organization Council, the regional group of those countries. They all support Iran, and they all say that they would back Iran if they were to retaliate against Israel. So perhaps maybe that was the case 40 years ago, but today the messaging is completely different. And you see this also in the global energy markets. The markets are never wrong. Markets are never wrong, dude.
He says under his breath, not fully believing.
Yeah. Okay, so now we have trustworthy Andrew. Well, anyway, guys, we got to wrap this up, and we all know whatever America decides on November 5th will affect the global community as well as our own nation. And Liberty Nation News will keep you informed. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks, panel. We are back to have a little fun with the panel of curmudgeons and comics, and we will muddle through. It's a C5 game of trivia, brought to you by Liberty Nation News' own Kirsten Brooker. And Andrew Moran is running the board.
Hello, Mata. Hello, Fada. Here I am at C5 Trivia. Trivia is very entertaining, and they'll say we have some fun if Dave starts laughing. So for all you youngins out there, that was a rendition of a classic Alan Sherman song. So it's that time again, C5 Trivia, the bi-weekly contest showcasing everyone's wits and its relation to the unconsciousness. Now let's get started on everyone's favorite trivia from the brilliant mind of Kristen Brooker, I should say. So, Sarah, question number 1. Who is the fairest of them all on Liberty Nation News? Is it Graham Noble, John Clark, Andrew Moran, or Dave Patterson? Oops, I'm sorry. That's actually Sarah's trivia list. Sorry. And the answer by everyone was Andrew Moran, by the way. So anyway, so here's actually Kirsten's trivia. Question number 1. What term is defined as a measure of readiness to confront enemies willing to use atomic weapons? This question goes to Sarah. Is it ballistic readiness, weapon preparedness, or nuclear posture?
Ballistic preparedness.
No. Dave, you cannot answer this question. Actually, Graham is in the military too, so Graham can't. John, you answer the question.
Nuclear posture.
Yes, that is correct. All right, question number 2. Zoox, a San Francisco artificial intelligence innovation company, has introduced plans to put blank on the roads. Andrew Moran's bystander, EV school buses, or EV robo-taxis. Sorry, Dave, go to you.
EV robo-taxis.
That is correct. Question number 3. All 32 NFL stadiums. When I read this question, I thought there were 30 teams in the NFL. I did not know there were 32. I didn't know that. Anyway, so all 32
there's 2 leagues, 16 in each league.
Okay, so you know what, Dave, Graham, you think you know better? Let's talk about baseball. Huh? Let's talk about NBA. How many teams are there? I'm kidding. So all 32 NFL stadiums are adopting a new system that uses blank to verify ticket purchases. John, is it facial recognition, eye scans, or facial authentication?
Facial authentication
Yes, that is
my guess.
Yes, that is correct. But why can't all sports leagues invest in
Isn't
these
that
new
the same
systems to
thing as
improve?
facial recognition?
It's not the same thing. No, that's 2 slightly different technologies, and that's why when the certain media outlets like the Gateway Pundit, wasn't going to mention any names, but I think I will, started screaming about facial recognition. It's not actually facial recognition, and it's not going to scan the entire crowd inside the stadium either. It's a rollout of something. I mean, I'm all for privacy. I'm a very big advocate of privacy, but what they're actually doing is not anywhere near as scary as some people are saying it is.
What I don't understand about facial authentication is, so what? I walk up to the ticket agent, I give him my ticket, he looks at it, takes it, tears it in half, and says, go find your seat. That's pretty simple.
But why can't these sports leagues invest in new systems? You look at the other day, the Red Sox and Dodgers game. Kenley Jansen had a perfect strike called a ball, and it would have ended the Sox in a win. But instead, the umpires got the wrong call, and then the Red Sox lose the game. So these leagues should be investing in better technology that replaces these umpires or these referees, or at least gives them better technology to call, or even better rules, mind you, to improve the game.
Strike recognition.
Andrew, they did. They had facial authentication, and they couldn't find the pitcher.
Was that a joke? Was that a joke?
That's it. Boom.
All right,
so-
let's move on, Andrew.
Yes.
This has gotten weird.
Hey, weird, but that's not the next question. So
Well, no, but it's not as it's probably not as weird as our little hillbilly in Ohio.
All right, so
I'm just
question
saying.
number 4.
I'm just quoting the Democratic Party. Go ahead.
All right, question number 4. This goes to Mr. Graham. There are several ways that migrants fraudulently enter the country, including sharing IP addresses, duplicating addresses and zip codes, and using the same social security numbers, using aliases, or using Kamala Harris's laugh.
Oh, well, those are my choices.
3 choices, yes.
Sharing social security numbers.
That is correct. Graham is on the board. Sarah, you're still blank.
You know why? I was on vacation for 2 weeks. I did not do anything. The news was on. I went and hid.
All right, so question number 5 then. This is for Sarah. What
Right.
word seems to be what word seems to suddenly and repeatedly be spouting out of the mouths of leftists and the Biden administration regarding the right and Donald Trump? Is it Trumponomics, weird, or Bidenese?
Weird.
Yes, that is right. Sarah is on the board.
I'm on the board.
Oh, we have an economics question here. Oh, who should I pick
No,
for this
I'm not
one?
going to be on the
Okay.
board for this
Oh,
one.
I'm going to pick Sarah just for that. So, question number 6. Following the July jobs report, what rule was triggered that suggests the U.S. is in or headed toward a recession? Is it the Graham-Noble rule, the Kamala Harris rule, or the Somme rule?
Must be the Somme rule.
Oh my gosh, you got to see it. There we go. We have our economist here. We got our economist. All right. Question number 7.
You guys are setting me up like Kamala.
Question number 7. The price tag attached to blank hit another record in May 2024. Graham, was it groceries, buying a home, or used cars?
Buying a home.
That is correct. Oh, so though, but I would say though, if you look at the consumer price index, food prices keep hitting record highs. You know, the growth rate has slowed, but it just keeps climbing. You go to the St. Louis Fed website, for example, and you look at the CPI for food price in the average U.S. city. It just keeps going up and up and up. But they act like it's being resolved because the growth rate is slowing. But that's all right. So question number 8. This is for Mr. Dave. At a press conference on August 2nd regarding the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump, acting director Ronald Rowe Jr. started his presentation by blank that blaming, absolving, or lecturing the Butler, Pennsylvania police force.
Absolving.
That is absolutely correct. Whoa, there's a tie here. Everyone has 2 points. Oh, question number 9. Back in 2019, Kamala Harris, during her campaign, made extreme promises surrounding blank and has stated that she will continue Biden's efforts in the same area. John, is it illegal immigration, abortion, or gun control?
Reparations isn't an option. I'll go with gun control because I'm not sure.
Yeah, gun control is the answer according to the amazing, impeccable Kirsten Brooker. So, final question number 10, and this is gonna go to Graham because he knows all this stuff here. What advanced statistic measures the average number of runs a pitcher is expected to allow per game based on the quality of contact they allow? Is it earned run average, or ERA, fielding independent pitching, or FIP, or is it batting average on balls in play, BABIP?
What was the question again?
Okay, Sarah, you should know that. What advanced stat measures the average number of runs a pitcher is expected to allow per game
ERA.
based on the quality of contact? No. Based on the quality of contact they allow. FIP. Yes, Dave got it. Yes, Dave.
Oh, I didn't get FIP.
So the FIP focuses on strikeouts, walks, and home runs allowed to evaluate a pitcher's performance more accurately. So we have a tie here between John and Dave. They both have 3 points. How should we do this? Let's go for recent economic news.
Give us both the coffee cup and call it a day.
Or
Yeah, I'm in charge of presents. We're not getting the coffee cups today.
pistols and call it a duel.
The July annual inflation rate came out on the time of this recording. What was it? 3.2%, 3%, or 2.9%?
3.2%.
2.9.
Yes, Dave got it. Dave today is
Dave is the winner.
And that's it for trivia. And here's Sarah.
Yeah, but that was an artificial number.
Yes.
Yeah,
I will not disagree with you.
The real number is
Actually-
3.9%. So
Actually, let's wait till the end of the month when it's adjusted upward.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's the jobs board. The jobs board is the one that's adjusted up.
Is it?
This is the only way I learn economics is to have Andrew on the show. So, whatever.
And basically,
Anyway, guys, thank you so much. Well, folks, we hope you ended on a high note after our randomly weird show. Hopefully you at least had fun And thanks for playing again. That's it for our Conservative 5 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform. YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble, we're on them all. As well, Liberty Nation News has its own Roku channel where you can see all of our TV productions. I'm your host, Sarah Cowgill. Thanks for joining us today for Free Thinking, Free Speech, LibertyNation.com.